The smell hit me first. Something between stale coffee and pine cleaner that had long since given up trying. The bed was made with the kind of tight military corners that feel unwelcoming on purpose. A single lamp on the nightstand threw yellow light across walls the color of old teeth. I sat on the edge of the mattress with my purse in my lap and told myself it was only 2 weeks. My daughter had hugged me at the door. A real hug, the kind that lasts just long enough to feel like a goodbye. "It's just temporary, Mom," she said. "While the renovations are finished, you know the contractors make everything dusty, and your lungs." "My lungs are fine," I said. "Mom!" That was it, just my name, in that particular tone she'd been perfecting since she was 16. The tone that meant, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Her husband loaded my 2 suitcases onto a cart the front desk attendant brought out. He didn't look at me when he did it. He barely looked at me in 3 years, if I was being honest with myself. But I'd always found excuses for that. He was busy. He was tired. He was just that kind of quiet man. I stood in the lobby of the Clover Ridge extended stay and watched their car pull out of the parking lot. My daughter lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel as they passed the window. I lifted my hand back. That was a Thursday in January. By the following Tuesday, I understood that no one was coming back. I want to tell you exactly who I was before all of this because I think it matters. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I am 74 years old. I taught 3rd grade at Pinewood Elementary in Harborview, Ohio for 31 years. I know every child I ever taught. I kept a photograph album, 1 class portrait per year, and I could still tell you something specific about almost every face in every one of those pictures. Marcus, who couldn't read until halfway through 2nd grade and then read everything he could get his hands on. Lily, who cried every Monday morning until she discovered she was good at math. When my husband Gerald passed 5 years ago, I grieved the way you grieve when you've had a genuinely good marriage. Slowly, completely, and with a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't go away so much as it gets incorporated into who you are. We'd lived in our house on Birchwood Lane for 38 years. Yellow shutters, a rose garden I'd been building since 1991. A kitchen where I knew which burner ran hot and which drawer stuck in humid weather. My daughter's name is Carol. She is 46. Her husband is a man named Dennis who sells commercial real estate and refers to himself, without any apparent irony, as a deal maker. They have 2 children, my grandchildren, who I love the way you love children, completely and without condition. For the last 2 years before that Thursday in January, Carol had been suggesting, in various gentle ways, that the house was getting to be too much for me. The stairs, Mom. The yard, Mom. What if something happened and you were alone, Mom? I always said I was fine. I was fine. I took my blood pressure medication every morning. I walked 2 miles 4 times a week. I had a standing Tuesday dinner with my friend Ruth, who lived 12 minutes away and had known me since 1987. But Carol was persistent in the way that patient people are persistent. Not loudly, just steadily, like water working on stone. And when she suggested the renovations, new electrical, new plumbing, a full basement waterproofing, I said yes because I trusted her. Because she was my daughter. Because I had held her the night she had her tonsils out and she'd cried herself to sleep against my shoulder, and I had never once in 46 years had a real reason not to trust her. I signed the papers she put in front of me because she explained them as contractor agreements. I didn't read them as carefully as I should have. That is the thing I have to live with, and I have made my peace with it, though it took a long time. The first 3 days at Clover Ridge, I was patient. The room was adequate. Small, but adequate. Small, but adequate. I had my own bathroom. There was a little table by the window where I set up my book and my reading glasses and the small ceramic cardinal that had sat on Gerald's desk for the last 20 years of his life. I ate in the small dining room downstairs in the mornings and ordered delivery in the evenings because the restaurant options within walking distance were limited, and it was January in Ohio and I hadn't thought to pack my good winter coat. I thought I was coming back in 2 weeks. I called Carol on Friday. She answered and told me the contractors had found additional water damage and it was going to take a bit longer than expected. She sounded rushed. I could hear Dennis saying something in the background. I called on Monday. It went to voicemail. I called on Wednesday. She answered and told me not to worry. Everything was moving along. She'd be by to see me on the weekend. She did not come on the weekend. It was my friend Ruth who first said it plainly. I'd finally called her. I'd been embarrassed for reasons I can't fully explain now, except that I think some part of me already knew what I didn't want to know, and she listened to everything and then she went quiet for a moment. "Eleanor," she said, "have you called your bank?" I hadn't. I'd been managing with the cash I had in my wallet. About $240 I'd been stretching carefully, and the small amount on a credit card I used for deliveries. It hadn't occurred to me to call the bank because in my mind I was going home in 2 weeks and everything was temporary. I called from the lobby payphone the next morning because my cell phone battery had died and I'd left my charger at home. When I gave my account number and went through verification, the representative paused. "Ms. Marsh," she said, "I'm showing that a change of authorized signatory was processed on this account 14 days ago. I'm sorry? And there's a power of attorney on file that was used to initiate a consolidation of both your primary checking and your savings accounts." I stood in that lobby with the receiver, pressed against my ear, and felt something shift underneath me. Not physically, but in the way that certain truths rearrange the ground before you've consciously admitted them to yourself. "What does that mean?" I said, though I knew. "It means someone with legal authority over your finances has made changes to the accounts, ma'am. I'm not able to discuss the specifics of those transactions with you directly in this case because—" She paused again. "Because the power of attorney supersedes your individual access at this time." I thanked her. I hung up. I sat down in one of the lobby chairs and looked at the fake ficus in the corner for a long time. Then I picked up the receiver again and called Ruth. "I need a ride," I said. Ruth came within 40 minutes. She didn't say "I told you so," which is one of the reasons she had been my friend for 37 years. The drive to the county records office took 25 minutes. I had not brought my reading glasses and my hands were not entirely steady, but I was thinking clearly, more clearly actually than I had in weeks. Something about being up against a hard fact focuses the mind in a way that ordinary worry never does. I knew what I was looking for. If a power of attorney had been used on my accounts, it had to be registered. If any property transactions had occurred, they would be on record. I was a woman who had spent 31 years teaching 8-year-olds how to break complicated things into smaller steps. I could do this. The clerk at the records office was a young woman named, according to her badge, Stephanie. She had the particular expression of someone who has seen a great deal of human misery come through a government counter and has learned to remain professionally neutral about it. But when I explained what I was looking for, something shifted in her face. "Let me pull everything associated with your address," she said. She did not make me ask twice. What she slid across the counter to me 10 minutes later was not a surprise, exactly. But seeing it in print, in the flat, unemotional language of legal documents, made it real in a way that Carol's silence hadn't quite managed to. The power of attorney had been executed 8 months ago. I had signed it. I remembered signing something. Carol had explained it as a precaution, something that let her help me if I ever had a medical emergency and couldn't manage things myself. She presented it at Sunday dinner with a notary who she'd introduced as a friend of Dennis's, and I'd signed it because I was eating pot roast, and my granddaughter was showing me a drawing she'd done at school, and it had seemed, in that moment, like a reasonable thing that sensible adult children did for their aging parents. What I had not understood, what I now understood completely, was that Carol had used that document to add herself as the sole authorized party on both financial accounts. She had used it 6 weeks later to initiate the sale of the house on Birchwood Lane. The house had sold 38 days ago for $412,000. I sat with that piece of paper in my hands for what felt like a long time. "Are you all right?" Stephanie asked. "No," I said, "but I will be. I want to tell you something about what it feels like to understand that your child has stolen from you, because I think people imagine it as a single clean moment of anger. It isn't. It arrives in layers, over hours and days. First, there is the disbelief, which is its own kind of grief, the grief of a thing you can no longer pretend is possible. Then there is something cold and practical that moves in behind it, because when you are 74 and you have no home and no access to your money, you do not have the luxury of sitting with your feelings. You have problems to solve. Ruth drove me to the public library. This was her idea, and it was a good one. I used one of the computer terminals to look up elder law attorneys in Harborview. I wrote 4 names and phone numbers on a piece of paper the librarian tore out of a notepad for me. I called all 4 from Ruth's cell phone in the library parking lot. 2 didn't answer. 1 had a 2-month wait list. The 4th, a woman named Patricia Ogle, whose office was 8 blocks away, said she could see me the following morning. I slept at Ruth's house that night. She made up the guest room and put a glass of water and 2 of my blood pressure pills. She'd driven back to Clover Ridge to get my medication from the room on the nightstand without being asked. We didn't talk much that evening. I wasn't ready to say it all out loud yet, and she understood that. In the morning, I put on the same clothes I'd been wearing for 2 days and walked into Patricia Ogle's office. She was in her early 50s, direct in the way that people who spend their days handling injustice learn to be. She didn't react with horror to my story. She reacted with focus, which was exactly what I needed. She asked questions. She wrote things down. When I finished, she set her pen flat on the desk. "The power of attorney document," she said. "Did you understand at the time that it included authority over real property transactions?" "No," I said. "I understood it as a medical proxy." "That's the single most important thing you've told me." She picked her pen back up. "The scope of what was represented to you versus what you actually signed. That's misrepresentation. Combined with the financial account consolidation and the property sale, what you're describing is elder financial abuse under Ohio statute. This is not a gray area." I exhaled slowly. "What do?" I said. "You let me file an emergency motion to freeze the sale proceeds, and you let me refer you to Adult Protective Services today, not tomorrow. And you don't contact your daughter or her husband from this moment forward without my knowledge." I didn't contact them. It was the hardest instruction I'd ever been given and the easiest one I'd ever followed, because by then I was done waiting for Carol to explain herself. I need to tell you something about Dennis because it is important. When Patricia began the formal discovery process and obtained records of the transactions, what became clear was that Dennis had been the architect. Carol had been, as my attorney put it, a willing participant with varying degrees of understanding. The plan, and it was a plan with a timeline and specific steps, had been built around Dennis's knowledge of real estate transaction structures. He had identified the window between the POA signing and the property listing. He had arranged the notary. He had been the one, Patricia later established, who had filed the new account authorization forms at the bank. I don't tell you this to excuse my daughter. She was there. She signed things. She left me at that hotel with 2 suitcases and 2 fingers lifted off a steering wheel and said nothing. But I tell you because the truth is complicated, and I have always believed that complicated truths are worth telling completely. The emergency motion was granted. The sale proceeds, $412,000, were frozen in an escrow account pending litigation. Carol called me 3 days after the motion was served. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. On the 5th call, she left a message that was 9 minutes long. I listened to it once, late at night, sitting in Ruth's guest room with the lights off. She was crying. She kept saying she was sorry. She kept saying Dennis had told her it was all legal, that they were just protecting the assets, that I would have agreed if I'd understood. I deleted it, not out of anger, out of clarity. The legal process took 4 months. I'm going to tell you that plainly because I don't want to give you the impression it was fast or easy. It was neither. There were depositions and motions and a mediation session I attended with Patricia at my side and said almost nothing during, because Patricia had asked me to let her speak and I trusted her. I stayed with Ruth for the first 6 weeks. Then Patricia helped me find a short-term apartment rental through a program I hadn't known existed. A transitional housing resource specifically for adults over 60 who were navigating legal disputes or family crises. I had a small living room, a bedroom, a kitchen where I could cook my own food. I bought a new charger for my phone. I found a Tuesday farmer's market 2 blocks away. I rebuilt small routines, the way you do when everything larger has been taken apart. My grandchildren. I want to be careful here, because they are children, and none of this was their doing. I missed them terribly. I thought about them constantly. I did not contact them because they were in Carol's house, and I didn't know what they'd been told, and I was following my attorney's guidance. That was the hardest part. Not the money, not the house, not even the betrayal. It was the Tuesday nights I used to spend with them, helping with homework and eating whatever Carol had made, and watching my granddaughter perform elaborate plays she'd written herself using stuffed animals as the cast. Missing that felt different from the other losses. It felt like something being taken from the children too, and that I could not make okay in my mind. The mediation resulted in a settlement agreement. Carol and Dennis agreed to return the full proceeds of the house sale. They agreed to a structured repayment of the financial account funds that had been spent, approximately $61,000 over 14 months. Dennis entered a pre-trial diversion agreement with the county prosecutor. Carol received a formal civil judgment and was placed on a supervision agreement. I did not attend the final hearing. I had said everything I needed to say in a written victim impact statement that Patricia submitted on my behalf. I wrote it myself, at the kitchen table of my temporary apartment, and I didn't cry while I wrote it. I stated the facts clearly and I described the impact clearly, and at the end I wrote one sentence that I meant more than anything else in the document. I am 74 years old and I know exactly who I am. And that was not something you were able to take from me. I bought a condominium in a small complex 12 minutes from Ruth's house. 2 bedrooms, a balcony where I've started a container garden. The kitchen has a gas stove, which I prefer. The bedroom gets morning light. I didn't recreate Birchwood Lane. I didn't try to. That house was Gerald and me and 38 years, and it is gone. And spending the rest of my life grieving a building didn't seem like a useful way to honor what it had held. I kept what mattered. The photograph albums. The ceramic cardinal. Gerald's copy of To Kill a Mockingbird with his underlines in the margins. I went back to the library. Not to use the computers this time, just to sit. Libraries do something to me that they've always done. This particular sensation of being surrounded by everything that has ever been thought and written down and survived. I sat in one of the big reading chairs near the window for about an hour and didn't read anything, just sat. A woman about my age settled into the chair across from me and we smiled at each other the way strangers do when they're sharing quiet. "Good afternoon," she said. "Good afternoon," I said. And that was all. And it was enough. I have thought a long time about whether to tell this story. Not because I'm ashamed. I am not ashamed. And I want to say that clearly because I know that shame is one of the reasons these things so often go unspoken. Older people who have been deceived by their own families often carry a weight of embarrassment that belongs entirely to the people who wronged them. I refuse to carry that. I tell it because of the details I missed and that you might recognize. The document put in front of you at a dinner table. The notary who's a friend of a friend. The explanations that seem just reasonable enough when you trust the person explaining. The renovation that never quite finishes. I tell it because of what my friend Ruth taught me by driving to a county records office without being asked. I tell it because of Stephanie, who slid papers across a counter with the kind of quiet efficiency that I now understand as its own form of dignity given to another person. I tell it because of Patricia Ogle, who said this is not a gray area and meant it. And I tell it because I'm 74 years old, and I taught children for 31 years, and I know the difference between a lesson that has been truly learned and one that has only been heard. This one, I have learned. If you are watching this and something I said reminded you of something in your own life, a document you signed without reading carefully enough, a family member who's been steering your finances in ways that feel hard to question, a home that somehow never quite belongs to you the way it used to, please don't wait the way I waited. Please don't give the benefit of the doubt the way I gave it. Call your bank. Call your county records office. Call an elder law attorney. Call a friend who will drive you somewhere without asking why. You do not have to be in crisis to deserve help. You only have to be paying attention. I'm Eleanor Marsh. I live on the third floor of a building with a balcony, and this morning I had coffee in the sun and watched two sparrows argue over the edge of a planter, and I thought, this is mine. All of this, right now, is mine. That's enough. That's more than enough.